What's up, fam? It's your boy B High back on the check-in, and hey man, I got some more crazy news from 2020, and here's what's going on. Representative Congressman John Lewis, Democrat of Georgia, the renowned civil rights leader who served as a symbol of the movement throughout his more than 3 decades in Congress, he died on Friday, man. From the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama on Bloody Sunday, Lewis decisively carved a place for himself in the history books as a courageous young activist during the height of the civil rights movement. He was elected to Congress back in 1986 and served 17 terms representing an Atlanta area district. While in Congress, Lewis served as a physical reminder of how far the country had come on civil rights and how much more was left to be done. Lewis, the youngest keynote speaker at the March on Washington in 1963, was the only person who delivered remarks at the event to witness Barack Obama becoming president as the nation's first African-American president 45 years later. When Lewis asked Obama to sign a commemorative photograph at his 2009 inauguration, President Obama wrote, "Because of you, John." Lewis was born February 21st, 1940 to a family of sharecroppers on a farm outside of Troy, Alabama, and attended segregated public schools. Inspired by the activism demonstrated by the Montgomery bus boycott and Martin Luther King Jr., Lewis began his work of what he liked to call good trouble, which he does have a documentary out right now talking about his life's work. Lewis started his civil rights activism by organizing sit-in demonstrations at segregated lunch counters in Nashville, Tennessee, where he was a student at the historically black Fisk University. Then in 1961, Lewis joined the Freedom Rides to protest segregation at bus terminals across the South by refusing to leave seats designated for white patrons, facing angry mobs and intense violence. The KKK deflated the tires of a bus at a stop in Anniston, Alabama, which was later firebombed. And in Montgomery, Alabama, an angry mob confronted the activists and hit Lewis in the head with a wooden crate. It was very violent. I thought I was going to die. I was left lying in a Greyhound bus station in Montgomery unconscious. That's what John Lewis told CNN while reflecting on the Freedom Rides 40 years later. Lewis later became the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC, a position he held from 1963 to 1966, leading student civil rights activism. Lewis went on to help organize the August 1963 March on Washington, where the then 23-year-old spoke from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, but his appearance wasn't without some last-minute controversy. Lewis initially planned to criticize the Kennedy administration's proposed Civil Rights Act for being too little and too late, and vowed to march through the South, through the heart of Dixie, the way Sherman did. But other activists persuaded Lewis to tone down his language so he wouldn't alienate the Kennedy administration. Lewis ultimately settled on saying, "We support the administration's civil rights bill, but with great reservation because it didn't go far enough to protect peaceful protesters and voting rights." And with that being said, Lewis delivered a rousing speech before the roughly 250,000 people gathered before the Lincoln Memorial. He said, "We are tired. We're tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now." Lewis was at the forefront of the civil rights movement again just under 2 years later on March 7th, 1965, a day that later became known as Bloody Sunday. Lewis and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's Hosea Williams led about 600 people planning to march 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery to advocate for expanded voting rights for African Americans. But they were met on the Edmund Pettus Bridge by state troopers who demanded that the marchers leave. When they refused, the troopers launched violent attacks armed with bull whips, tear gas, and nightsticks, and charged at the marchers with their horses. A state trooper beat Lewis with a nightstick so severely that it caused a skull fracture. My God. Images of the Bloody Sunday violence sparked public outrage that pushed Congress to pass the landmark Voting Rights Act, which then President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law in August 1965. As a congressman later, Lewis led annual delegations to Selma to commemorate Bloody Sunday and educate his fellow lawmakers on the civil rights movement. Lewis was quoted as saying, "Our country would never be the same because of what happened on this bridge." He said that during the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, where he was joined by then President Obama. After gaining national prominence for leading SNCC, Lewis first won elected office in 1981 as a member of the Atlanta City Council and went on to win the Democratic primary for his congressional seat 5 years later. He served on the House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over welfare and social programs that Lewis championed. During the debate over the 2010 health care law, Lewis and other black lawmakers encountered protesters outside of the Capitol who hurled racial epithets as they walked past. He later invoked civil rights rhetoric in an impassioned speech during the House floor debate over what would ultimately become Obama's signature legislative accomplishment. Lewis was quoted as saying, "There are those who have told us to wait. They have told us to be patient. We cannot wait. We cannot be patient. The American people need health care and they need it now." In 2011, Obama awarded Lewis the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. And Obama was quoted as saying, "Generations from now, when parents teach their children what is meant by courage, the story of John Lewis will come to mind. An American who knew that change could not wait for some other person in some other time, whose life is a lesson in the fierce urgency of now." Lewis later described that experience as surreal. "If somebody told me one day I'd be standing in the White House and an African-American president presented me the Medal of Freedom, I would have said, 'Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?'" That's what Lewis said to the AJC, just recalling that whole situation. John Lewis was arrested for civil disobedience 45 times, mostly during the civil rights movement. But he was also arrested a handful of times as a lawmaker while participating in protests, most recently in 2013 while advocating for immigration reform. Lewis invoked the cost of his civil rights activism as he urged people to participate in the 2018 midterm elections. He said, "I have been beaten, my skull fractured, and arrested more than 40 times so that each and every person has the right to register and vote. Do your part. Get out there and vote like you've never voted before. Vote. #good trouble." And with that being said, man, I got to salute to Congressman John Lewis on a life well lived and accomplished, man. I mean, he really put it down for everybody in this country. And I'm going to sit there right there, man. Rest in peace, John Lewis, gone at 80 years old. Be High Radio, shouty. I'll holler at y'all in a minute. I'm gone.